Hi, I'm Salarah Starre and welcome to the Salarah Starre Podcast. With over 20 years of experience, I've had the privilege of working with thousands worldwide and sharing my expertise across various media platforms. This podcast is your go-to resource for mastering manifestation and unlocking your ultimate magnetism. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and let's dive in. And a very warm welcome back. Salarah here. It's so lovely to be back with you. I've been off for a couple of weeks actually, and since there hasn't been any live episodes, I have been to Sardinia. I keep wanting to say Sedona. I'd like to go to Sedona. And also on a cow cuddling experience. So for those of you who follow me on Instagram, take a look at those. I tell you what, it's the most beautiful experience going to a cow cuddling conscious dairy farm. Was really, really special. So if that's something that interests you, I've popped a few pictures up on Instagram. Today I have a very special episode lined up. Today I've got a beautiful guest of mine, Lucy. Lucy I met probably a good couple of years ago. Correct me in a moment, Lucy, if it's a bit longer than that, because I know time feels like it's kind of going really fast. And we were both completing a training course together. And you know what it's like when you just immediately hit it off with someone. I absolutely love Lucy. I'm sure that you're going to feel exactly the same. We hit it off immediately, and she's somebody that I hold to very high esteem. Lucy is an integrative transpersonal psychotherapist. I actually managed to say that without stumbling. I'm a published author and also a couples counsellor. Lucy is certified in dream work and is currently doing a 2-year training with the Institute of Psychedelic Therapy UK. And that's something I'd really love at some point to get you back on and have a really good discussion around psychedelic therapy at some point. Lucy's qualified in a whole host of other things as well. But I would say the most important thing for me, like beyond all of those qualifications, and what makes Lucy so special to me, is how incredibly down to earth, how real, and how relatable she is. And I think that's so important when you are trusting your heart with someone to help you through a rough patch. I wish that I had have known Lucy many, many years ago, because I'm sure I would have worked through so many things a lot quicker than some of the methods that I ended up stumbling across. And Lucy isn't somebody who only understands healing through textbooks. And I think that this is really important in this day and age. And, you know, although she's had a lot of professional training and understands, you know, a lot of theory intellectually, you'll see she's got a high level of emotional intelligence. So she's experienced some incredibly challenging periods in her own life. And she also understands what it means to really be in the depth of struggle and then having to find your way out. And I think that sometimes can make the most powerful therapist. And I think the combination of these professional expertise and this lived experience is what gives Lucy such a unique and valuable perspective. So I'm super, super excited for you to meet her. And we are going to be exploring it with so much that Lucy and I could talk about. We were exploring subjects before we planned the actual topic, and there are so many. So no doubt Lucy will be back on at some point. But before I go into the details of what we're going to be exploring today, actually, hi Lucy, thank you so much for joining me today, my love.
Hey.
Really lovely to have you on. Whereabouts are you based? Just for the listeners, whereabouts are you based? Anything I missed out?
South London, UK, in an area called Tooting.
Oh, I quite like that name. It sounds like something from the Magic Faraway Tree.
Doesn't look like it.
Have you read that book?
Yeah, many moons ago, I think.
Yeah, it's a really cool book. I wouldn't mind revisiting that. Imagine if they did a movie on that. Anyway, so we had quite a lot, didn't we, Lou? So we were thinking about, we have so much we can explore, but we decided to kind of narrow it down through the lens of something that we've personally worked a lot on in our own journeys. So we don't necessarily, you know, have a huge textbook and scientific understanding of, but we have a very lived experience of nervous system regulation and how it impacts mental, emotional, physical well-being, but also impacts how we see the world, how we respond to the world as a result of that. So if you were to summarize, throwing it out there, like the nervous system, how do you, if you had to explain that to someone in your own lived experience language, how would you explain what the nervous system is?
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's really difficult to explain because there are so many great experts out there. And if you want to know the science around it, I'd suggest Deb Dana's work is really good. Polyvagal theory, which comes from Stephen Porges, which there's some controversy around now, but that they would be the people to look at. The way that I understand the nervous system and how I've come to think of it in my own life is like this sort of system running in the background all the time, trying to keep me safe. And we even use words around it. We do understand it because we might say someone's getting on our nerves, or I'm feeling a bit nervy. You know, we use it in common parlance, but it's running in the background, and I know that I am regulated and my nervous system is in a kind of green zone when I'm feeling social, open-hearted, safe, probably quite energized, but maybe also a bit tired. That's okay too. And I know that I'm dysregulated, so something is occurring within the nervous system. I've gone into a different branch of it when I start to feel like maybe I've got a bit of tunnel vision and my heart is racing, or I'm a little bit panicky, I have some anxiety, or perhaps I go into more of a shutdown space as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm not able to respond, or I might freeze. So there's lots of different ways that the nervous system can show up in its dysregulation. But this process, for me anyway, has been about respecting that there's stuff going on in the background that might not be able to be controlled by conscious thought. And also that, how we live our lives impacts how our nervous system works. I mean, the more I do this work, the more I realize that pure talking therapy is not actually going to help with a lot of... If somebody is chronically dysregulated, we need to try and find out ways within their lifestyle to encourage greater regulation. And by what I mean by regulation is not that we never feel stressed, we never feel angry, any of those things. It's about how quickly you come back into a place of safety. Because our nervous system is designed to keep us safe. So, for example, if you're on a tube and you're late for a meeting, we still react like we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger in terms of our autonomic reactions, our physical reactions, and also our emotional reactions sometimes. So, really, we can become dysregulated very easily still. But that was originally intended to help us mobilize and get away from the tiger, or to freeze so that we might play dead. And those reactions still occur within our systems, but it's happening a lot more regularly if you're living a busy life. Does that make sense?
It makes massive sense, definitely. And it's really interesting to listen to your lens and your description of it. And I feel personally, the limited amount that I know of the nervous system, I'm pleased you recommended some resources there as well, is that it plays a massive role in absolutely everything. And if we were taught about the power of the nervous system, the different branches of the nervous system, how to regulate when we're dysregulated, the warning signs of dysregulation, the impact of dysregulation and regulation, at school or even at home or from a young age, our whole experience would be completely different. And what brought me into understanding a little bit about the nervous system was, I guess, one part of it, which is the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, which is what you're referring to, that kind of fight, flight or freeze when you're activated. I didn't even know that I was in a dysregulated state my whole life, because it was a very normal way to be in my household. There was always stress. There was always walking on eggshells. There was always watching every word. There was always trying to put fires out. And to me, I didn't know that there was anything else. And it wasn't until later on I started suffering from a very severe anxiety disorder. My physical body started showing signs of dis-ease and stress. And I went to go and seek help. First of all, I went down the means that was available to doctors to go and get some tablets to help it, but I knew that unless I got to the underlying cause, I'd just be on and off medication most of my life. And so I slowly started to learn a little bit more about it, and then I decided to learn the art of meditation and mindfulness, and I went on a teacher training course. I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I may as well learn how to do it properly and then teach it to other people. This was like 12 or 13 or something like that. And I became a qualified meditation and mindfulness instructor. But through that, I learned about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, and a little bit about the amygdala, and how I didn't understand it at that point about regulation and dysregulation, but I found and learnt some very simple and highly effective tools to help me, what I now know as regulating my nervous system. And it helped so much, Luce. It was unbelievable. Eventually, I was able to come off the tablets. I was teaching more and more people, especially the mindfulness part, I think was the tools that helped me the most, because anxiety is very much about living in the future, isn't it? And like depression about being in the past, and the present moment is where meditation and mindfulness can bring us back in. And that's kind of like how I understood it, if you like, but then taking it a little bit more through the spiritual lens of the battle of the two wolves. I like that to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. There's a battle going on inside all of us, battle between two wolves. One wolf is full of fear, full of anger, full of intolerance, impatience, and many other things. The other wolf is full of peace and presence and love and affection and joy. And the little boy says to his grandfather, which wolf wins? And the grandfather says, whichever one you feed. So from then, it's been a bit of a journey, like what food can I give my positive wolf to activate my parasympathetic nervous system? And what food can I, in some respects, I guess, restrict the negative wolf in order to stop that one being in control of my life? So that was the kind of lens that I came into it with. But now there's so much more, isn't there, out there, vagus nerve and all these other different branches of the nervous system. What would you say has been, for me, was meditation and mindfulness? What would you say has been one of your biggest tools or experiences that gave you firsthand understanding of how to regulate your nervous system?
Well, it's a good question, but I think in a way we need to go back, because I was just thinking as you were talking about how as a teenager and in my 20s, and even to some extent in my 30s, how disembodied I was. So I was really just, like many people, a kind of walking, thinking person. But it was all in my mind. I thought my mind was king. And I think the first step to a greater regulation, because it is okay to become dysregulated, it's about how you come back, to greater regulation is noticing the body. And that's where the mindfulness comes in. But I had a huge resistance to that. I was like, what, you want me to, I was sitting in therapy, like, you want me to focus on my stomach? Like, how is that going to help? It took me a long time to even entertain these ideas. But so now I'm noticing as we're talking, we're recording, okay, even though I'm mentally totally relaxed and know it's okay to make mistakes and that you're my friend and everything is all right, in my body, I can notice a churning in my stomach. That nervous in the background has gone, something different is happening. You're doing something that is a bit more important. People might hear it. They might think you're an idiot. That kind of thing is all going on. So I'm as we're talking, I've been taking really slow breaths. And that's something I've recently started to do. You can do it on a Zoom. You can do it as a therapist in a therapy session. If I notice a client is getting quite worked up, because we can use other words for dysregulators as well. Worked up, activated is one of my favorites. Then I can learn to soothe myself and remind, and I might just say in my head, I'm safe, I'm safe. So the way that we notice that something's a bit off or something feels a little dangerous, especially when it's disproportionate to the situation you're in. So the tube is 5 minutes late, I'm already running late. I'm a Londoner, clearly I keep mentioning the tube. Getting places on time. I need to remind myself, this is not an emergency. I'm allowed to be late. And then take those breaths, and listen to some soothing music, put my headphones in, those kind of things, so that whilst I might be becoming a bit activated, when I get there, I'll calm down much quicker. And it's all those micro things that we do in a day that will really help over a lifetime.
I love that. I've just got goosebumps. I really love
What
that.
does that mean?
Well, it just means that I really hear what you're saying. It's like, yeah, that really spoke to me. And I think the biggest thing that I've discovered, which is leaning into what you're sharing there, is it's the micro moments actually that for me have been the most impactful. But let me go back a bit and then I'll come back to that in a second. When you reassure yourself that I am safe, Another thing that I've started doing as well as that, which I have also found to be quite effective, which can also lean in if you understand, for the listeners who understand a little bit about inner child work and done a little bit that, you can take it slightly a step further. It's like starting to train yourself that you approve of certain situations. So if I'm going into a stressful situation that I know ultimately is for my good, but my nervous system registers it as unfamiliar, my nervous system is going to try and protect me from that, even though I know it's good. I use a similar technique, so either on my heart or my stomach, and I say, hey, yeah, it's okay, it's all right, I approve of this. I'm safe, and I completely approve that this is happening. So I feel like I'm giving the younger me the guiding, loving hand of the older me that's saying, hey, it's okay. I know that this is scary. We're safe. And I want you to know that I completely approve that this is happening.
Mm.
And I have found that that has been so impactful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because you have a thing that's going on that you can't really control. And then you have a layer on top, and this applies to most of our feelings actually, where you judge that thing, and that's the layer that we can take off. And I'll give you an example from my own life, because I think examples are much more helpful for listeners. But so I was sent away at 7 years old, an unaccompanied minor, travelled on my own to France to stay with an aunt and uncle who I didn't know very well for 10 days in the south of France. Anyway, I won't go into the details of it, but there ensued a very traumatic separation. And when I came back, I had what I now recognise to be really bad symptoms of PTSD. And something similar happened when I was 8. So anyway, now, whenever I go away from home, and it's lessening slowly over time, but I didn't know for 20 years what was going on. Whenever I go away from home, on holidays that I really want to take, to see friends that I really want to see, things that I have chosen to do, saved up for, paid for, I get to that airport, or I'm on the way to the airport, or even the day before I'm going to go, and I become dysregulated. There's a sense of panic that it's like that feeling that you've left your passport somewhere, that feeling happening all the time. And once I learned that the nervous system is operating in an attempt to protect me, and it's going, wow, 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 this is the situation that we had back then, this is the scary thing, I was able to say to myself, my body's making a mistake, I'm safe now, I want to be here. And sometimes I just have to ride it out, because I know that it'll take a couple of days, but once I'm lying on the beach in Greece, I will be relaxed, and I am always grateful that I've taken those holidays, for example. But I think it would be so easy for me to say to myself, and I did for years, what's wrong with me? I'm so privileged, I've got all these opportunities, why am I so anxious, why am I panicking, why am I feeling like I wish I hadn't booked this? But that doesn't help at all. So once I learned this is beyond my conscious control, actually I need to give myself compassion and love, because I do know where it comes from. It changed, the way I related to it changed, and yet those things still happen, even now, and I'm 44.
I want to come back to the micro moments in a minute, but just what you mentioned there, that when we dismiss our feelings, what's wrong with me, when we almost gaslight ourselves, I guess, and we dismissive, all these different things, it makes that part of us feel even more unsupported. There's less trust in the nervous system, and then the nervous system has to work even harder then to survive, because the only place it can reach for safety, it can't get that safety from. So when we become more compassionate with ourselves, when we allow these feelings floor space without trying to change them, without trying to find solutions, without trying to talk them around, without minimizing, without dismissing, it's actually really massively healing. Because then that part of us, it's almost like if we speak to a friend and we literally offload everything that we're feeling, and that friend sits there with a loving, compassionate ear. In fact, I'm going to give an example of when you did this for me, Luce. I like these real examples. I mean, you've done it for me loads, but when my daughter's boyfriend was terminally ill and eventually sadly passed away, I was going through an incredibly challenging time. In fact, that knocked my nervous system massively. But I remember there was something that you said on one of the calls. You saw me when nobody else had seen me. Yes, it's partly to do with your training, but actually you're just emotionally intelligent and a highly compassionate person. And you were able to see the different layers that I was holding. You might not even remember this, but I was explaining this to my daughter the other day. And this is why the intro, I say that how much I hold you to such high self-esteem. You said to me, not only are you holding, the grief for your daughter, you're holding your own grief, but you're also, and the way that you worded it, I can't remember exactly at the time, I actually felt really seen. And that was so healing. You didn't try and talk me out of it. You didn't try and dismiss it. You didn't minimize it. You didn't try and you just held that space and you saw my pain. And that really helped me with my healing. So now bringing us back to this and our own internal dialogue, if we're able to do that for ourselves, imagine how different we would feel in our own nervous system, how seen, how safe, how held we would feel. And we build the building blocks of that internal safety inside. Otherwise, it's just any other work that we try and do, if we don't go to the core, like through the compassion and the lens of being held by ourselves internally, it's almost like we're trying to build our house, metaphoric of our life, on sand. It becomes more of a destroyer energy, and this is something David Guillaume says, and I love it, rather than a builder energy. Like, how can I become a builder energy, and where am I in a destroyer energy and not showing ourselves love and not showing ourselves the compassion is destroying and chewing away at our nervous system even more. So first of all, as a friend, I want to say thank you, Luce, because you really helped me there. When nobody else saw the depth of what I was holding, you saw that. Equally, thank you for bringing that into the conversation today, because I think it's so important. Can we just switch on compassion? No, it's like everything else. It's a muscle, isn't it, that we have to learn to build.
Well, it's also about unlearning shame. My experience of coming home from those traumatic separations and acting out a lot and experiencing insomnia and crying fits and depression at age 7 and 8, right, which is when the brain is developing, the nervous system is still developing, so crucial ages, was that there was a little bit of love and compassion and quite a lot of worry for me, but there was also a hell of a lot of shaming and blaming from people who didn't understand how this was possible for a child to feel this deeply, and what on earth are you so upset about still. And even now, when I go into a really difficult place, it usually takes another loving person to remind me that actually that shaming voice is switched on, because I still go into, I'm a loser, what's wrong with me, no one's going to want to be around me, I won't have any friends. And usually we do need someone else. We do need co-regulation in those moments. We need someone. It doesn't need to be your partner. People often think it has to be a romantic partner. It doesn't have to be, but someone to just remind you gently that they love you. You might not be able to hear it right then, but I love having you around. It's really important to me that you're here. You matter. And also, that what I wanted to say to you when you were talking about how dysregulated your nervous system was watching and supporting your daughter when her partner passed away, is that is an appropriate response to someone very young who your daughter's madly in love with dying. I mean, now I've got goosebumps. Like, why do we think that is somehow not appropriate? Yeah. It's completely okay.
Yeah.
And it's also very challenging.
Yeah. And I think it was, just leaning in, speaking of that a little bit more, I think because my daughter was the main player going through something so horrendous, it was almost like I don't get to feel that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that at the time, of course. And it wasn't until you were, you brought the different levels and layers of what I was holding, it actually really impacted me. I was like, wow, no wonder I'm finding this so difficult. No wonder. So, and it's like you say, just having that one person just holding that, even a small bit of space, can be so impactful. And it's about learning to have that compassion for ourselves, but also compassion for other people, and that I found that is a journey in itself. And I like the way that you said compassion is unlearning shame. And also I've be interested to know what your thoughts are on this too, that compassion is the opposite of judgment, which I guess judgment is shame. They're kind of similar-ish.
Yeah, well, I usually say judgment is the opposite of curiosity, because we can't be curious and judgmental at the same time. Being judgmental, we're saying something's right or wrong. And if we're being curious, we're exploring and we're asking questions. And compassion, I think officially translates from I think it's Latin, forgive me if I'm wrong on that, to suffer with. And I think of it as being alongside, which is what we were very much taught to do as therapists. Don't jump into someone's pain and try and take it away or live it for them, and don't dismiss it, be alongside. And in a way, you're talking about self-compassion as a being alongside oneself. And that really, really works when we talk about the wounded child, the inner child. If I go to an airport and I start to feel very dysregulated and I judge myself for it, what I'm saying is to that little 7-year-old who was terrified, what's wrong with you? Why are you not okay? Have a biscuit. Or in my case, as an adult, it would be, have a glass of wine. No, that's not. And actually, this is a different point, but I think most of addiction is a response to chronic dysregulation. And I've definitely experienced a lot of addiction in my life. So I think self-compassion, people bandy the term around like it's so easy, but we are on ourselves if we've experienced that kind of shaming from caretakers.
And I think it's kind of like the more and this is from my own experience and seeing some of my clients over the years, the more we're kind of like alchemists, I guess, in a way. Like we turn our darkness into light, our garbage into our gifts. And it was something I think I heard in Buddhism, like if you imagine a cloud in the sky and then suddenly that cloud's not there the next day, it hasn't disappeared. It can't disappear. What has happened is it's changed form. So the way I see a lot of the hurt and the pain and the limiting beliefs, which are born from all sorts of different things, and all of that, those kind of painful experiences, is we can alchemize them. We can turn our wounds into our wisdom, our garbage into our gifts. And for many years, I always thought shadow work was all about the darkness of the soul being in the shadow, the anger or the resentment or the fear, whatever it might be. But actually what I've realized more and more is actually a lot of our gifts and a lot of our light is also in the shadow. Yes. And the more we do this work, we release that. And judgment has been a big journey for me. Resentment and judgment has been a massive journey for me. And I've noticed the more that I have worked on myself with regards to judgment and resentment and such like, the more I have then revealed the gifts that are in the light, in the shadow, which are the light side of the gifts of the compassion and the empathy and the understanding. So a natural side effect of overcoming some of the tougher aspects of my journey has naturally heightened these other aspects of it. So it's not just like, oh, I'm just going to cultivate compassion. We've got to kind of alchemize some of the stuff, the shame, like you say, that is stopping us from connecting to that. And that's why I think another episode at some point, Luce, really speaking to the power of psychedelics in healing and transformation. I think it would be great for listeners too, because there's more and more out there now. It's not becoming so much like a hippie taboo type conversation. There's massive grounds for really advocating it in the right circumstances, in the right setting, with the right people, of course, because it can be very, very powerful. Was there anything I said there that you want to speak to?
Yeah, actually, you reminded me when you were talking about alchemizing and that kind of, it's a Jungian idea from Carl Jung, the idea of the alchemy of transformation, going from, that we need lead to become gold, right? That's where gold comes from. So, and there's lots of kind of, he calls them operations that you have to go through in order for that process to take place. But the beginning of that process is called the negredo, which means the blackening, the darkness. And when somebody comes to me in my therapy practice and they're really in a state of completely like, I don't know, I'm in the darkness and I'm at this crisis point, whilst I recognize that can be a dangerous point in someone's life and there might be suicidal ideation, there could be a lot of depression going on, I also always hold in mind, and it's part of my transpersonal training, to hold in mind that this could be the beginning of a transformation that leads to that gold, right? But it also made me think of a guy called Richard Rohr, I think he's a Catholic priest, which is interesting that I love everything he says so much because I was brought up a Catholic and have turned massively against Catholicism in later. And he says, if you don't transform your suffering, you will transmit it. And I think it's quite an edgy thing to say, but I do think it's true. And another thing that I saw recently that someone else had written was, if you don't deal with your demons, they'll raise your children. All these ideas that somehow, we have to do this work or we will suffer and those around us will suffer. It's really important. It can be done with patience and compassion as well, and standing for how difficult it is to stay in those dark places, and trust when you're in them that actually, this could lead to a breakthrough. I think that's really hard. We tend to want to fix people. We can't bear to sit with them when they're in a really dark place, when they're shaming themselves. And whilst it's important to kind of reach towards them and maybe try and gently say that this isn't helpful, part of my job is often to sit with people in pain and not try and fix them. Because really, basically I did however many years and however many thousands of pounds of therapeutic training to learn that everybody wants to be seen and heard. And sometimes my therapist friends and I just joke that we bring all these different tools out of our metaphorical toolbox, and actually all they wanted was to come and sit and be seen and heard. And I think that applies to all of us, doesn't it?
It massively does, yeah. And what you mentioned there really, what the thing that you read in the Catholic priest, what he said, it reminded me of something that Will Smith said. It's not our fault what happened to us, but it is our responsibility to change it.
Mm-hmm.
And I so that kind of leans into a little bit about what you say. Otherwise, we have these, I don't like to call them character defects. I learned that through one system. It's the only, have you got another way of me saying that, by the way?
Character defects, what, from the 12-step fellowships they talk about?
Yeah, I always struggle with saying defects because I don't see it as a defect as such.
I like to think about them as either coping strategies or protective mechanisms that were developed in early life. Defences, really.
So many defences and coping strategies that I learned when I was younger did create a very distorted view of the world. I didn't know that I didn't know, of course, but it wasn't until so many repetitive patterns and landmines and, the game of whack-a-mole emotionally, I couldn't unsee that there was the only common denominator in all of this stuff was actually me. So it was great in the sense that it helped me to slowly start to look at my wounds. But it's actually Holly, my daughter, who, for those of you who read the book, you'll know that she was the catalyst. Is I could see myself doing to her what had happened to me, and I was very grateful to have seen it. Very, very painful, but it was one of the most powerful turning points of actually this stops with me, because I don't want to imprint the same onto her. I mean, there's going to be a certain element of it. I mean, I love to study the Kabbalah. I've studied it since 2012. It's an amazing technology and blueprint for living life. I'll probably study it for the rest of my life because it's so empowering. And the reason why I mentioned that, I'm probably going to forget now, I'm probably going to have to circle back to that, is why did I come into that?
Holly in defense.
Yeah, so you know what, it's probably going to go on. I'm going to make a cup of tea later on. It's going to be like, oh, it's a bit too late. But it's basically working with the idea, there we go, I've got it, thank you, is that that we're all here and we all have our own particular soul mission. In the Kabbalah, they call it your tikkun. So we all have our own soul correction. So say, for example, I have my own set of stuff that I have decided to overcome in this lifetime. And in order for me to do that, I need a set of circumstances. So if we go kind of Kabbalistically, Hindu and some other traditions of reincarnation, we choose our parents, etc., etc. I have chosen a certain set of circumstances in order for me to learn and overcome and go through my own soul correction. It's all very loving. It's not kind of like, oh, your soul needs correcting. It's just understanding what repetitive triggers and the wounds and the patterns, etc., etc. And so in some respects, it helped me not to feel intense shame and guilt for not waking up sooner as a mother, but also helped me in over a long period of time and working longer with my Kabbalah teacher was actually the resentment that I'd held towards my family for being as screwed up as I had become was actually a part of my soul's journey and a part of my soul's gift. So it took me out of this perpetual victim mode, because I was very much a victim, very much blaming. And in the early stages of learning Kabbalistic wisdom, moving from a victim into a victor, turning your garbage into your gifts. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening for me? You would have heard similar.
I like that.
And that helped too, because it stopped a lot of the feelings of shame that I had experienced. Not to say, oh, well, that's okay then because she chose it, and that's okay then because I chose it. It's not dismissing it either, but it just helped to give a broader lens over a very tough life. And it gave it more meaning as well.
Yeah. And that's where I think we can use the word "and" instead of "but" to great effect, is that, you know, it was an extremely painful road that you had to travel, or you ended up traveling as a young person, and it has led you to many gifts. So we, you know, both things are true. And I think that's the height of emotional maturity, actually, is to be able to sit with something that seems incompatible and make it compatible.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very mindful that I've been recording for 36 minutes. We've got a few minutes left just to perhaps tie a couple of loose ends up. I just want to say, I've absolutely loved chatting with you, my love. So can I just ask you now, will you come back on in a few months' time and we can do a second installment?
Yes, I think we should talk about holotropic breathwork.
Yes, I'd love to, actually. So we'll get a date in the diary after this, or in the next week or so, and we'll make sure that we get that in, because I think that would be great. There's a couple of subjects I'd like to pick your brain on. Let's go back to the micro moments. I had it written down on my piece of paper. I kept wanting to circle back, but then we've got all these branches of conversation that appeared since. What would you say for the listener if we go back to the beginning, talking about the nervous system regulation? For you, what are your micro moments that you notice? We kind of mentioned a little bit about them. We spoke about the tube, where it's kind of common maybe for a few people to have a similar thing. So for example, one of my micro moments was, oh my God, I really need to just go to the toilet, and I'll text while I'm on the toilet, and then I'll just have to just go put my phone down and then quickly go and make lunch, but I'll wolf the lunch down. And I noticed that I was in a perpetual state of tension. And actually, it's these micro moments. What about, it's a bit of a strange example, but what about if I don't take my phone into the loo and I just really enjoy just going for a wee? Sorry, listeners, but let's just be real with it. And starting to inject consciousness into these areas that I noticed I was uptight, rigid, unnecessarily putting my nervous system under stress. So for me, it's those kind of micro moments. Is there anything for you?
Well, an interesting one that I noticed recently is that if I see 4 clients back to back, and maybe a session runs on and another person turns up early, so there's very little break, because usually therapy sessions are 50 minutes, right? So we can have the therapist wee, is what I call it. But then I will often find that I'm absolutely fine in those 4 hours. But then as I'm walking home, I can feel that my nervous system has begun to shut down. And it's not a pleasant kind of sleepy... It's like I don't want to speak to anyone. I don't really have any words. I can't think of interacting with my kids. You know, it's not pleasant. So one of the things that I do now is I really try to work my diary out so that there are these breaks in the day as well, so that I have time for a meditation before I go home, or to water the plants, or to do a little dance in my therapy room, something like that. And the other thing is, I have a terrible long-standing habit, I won't say terrible, but it was a coping mechanism for sure, of making every day useful. So have I done some exercise? Even meditation and breathwork can become something to tick off the list. Everything can become about productivity. And so I don't know if I've found the answer to that yet, except that the more I rest and relax, the easier I find it to rest and relax. So it's about catching myself. Am I getting into that zone where a free hour looks quite scary, where I'm like, what am I going to do with that hour? And actually seeing it through the lens of, okay, I'm going into that place where I'm filling every hour of my day. I know where that goes. I have my own little mini run into the wall sort of burnouts, where I then crash for a couple of days, or I get sick. And so I now know, well, actually, this is the Sunday I need to take completely off, or I need to watch a box set, or I need to say to my partner, listen, can we just go for a walk? You know, it's those little things as well. And I think that, you know, that will lead to a bigger conversation as well around boundaries with oneself and with others, and how to actually get that across to yourself. I've had to learn that through repeating the pattern so many times.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest teacher, isn't it? Repeating the pattern and the pain of repeating the pattern. I certainly know that that's the way I've learned, is usually the hard way. So what I'm hearing, which I love, is spaciousness, just giving yourself a little bit of extra breathing space, which is definitely something I've implemented. So I can speak to that too. And also what I'm hearing you say, Luce, is listening to your body. Like there might be a day that you like, otherwise, like you say, it becomes this very kind of like robotic, rigid tick box experience where there's no real, energy in it or embodiment in anything that you're doing. It's actually, sometimes I'll say to myself, if I feel myself in that pushy mode, what am I feeling? I'm feeling tired. What do I need? I need to rest. And actually listen.
Just on that, I just want to quickly add that when we've been in that go, go, go mode for a number of days or weeks, it's really important to remember, and this is certainly my experience, but I also believe it's correct in terms of nervous system theory, is that it's very difficult. If you ever sit down and think, now I'm going to rest, and you can't sit still, that is because you can't go from being right up here to right down there. So that's when it's better to get on the yoga mat and do something or go for a walk. So something that is active relaxation and good for your nervous system, still movement, and it brings you down slowly.
It's a bit like landing a plane, I guess. You've got to you can't just go from flying up at high altitude and then just like drop onto the landing strip. You've got to kind of bring yourself down.
Yeah, it is like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks, Luce. So, very enriching today, my love. I knew it would be. We've been wanting to get this podcast recording in for a little while. So thank you for making the time today. It's very much appreciated, as is your energy always. If the listeners want to get hold of you, follow you, and all of that shadazzle, how can they do that? What are your main platforms? FRY. Beautiful. Any final thoughts or words that you would like to share?
I think I've had this phrase running through my head. I was wondering if it'd be the title of another book or something, which is "It Takes Years." Just that I used to believe that I would go and fly off and do an ayahuasca retreat, or I would go and see the next therapist, or I would go to the yoga every day, and that was going to be the thing that would fix me and change me. And I think it's really hard to hear if you're not in that space, but I have realised that all of this takes years, not months, weeks, and sometimes change is a bit like a grain, the sand analogy, where you put all the grains of sand in the scales and then it's that last grain that makes the scales tip. Yes. So I think it's really important to just keep getting up and doing the next right thing, and just be very patient, because it took me a long time to get to the point where I've really noticed big changes in the things that I was suffering.
Well, you've done amazingly well, my love. Thank you for bringing your beautiful energy and your wisdom into this space. And I highly recommend for the listeners to check out Lucy's website and Instagram. We will put them in the show notes as well, so that you can just easily click on the link and watch the space, because no doubt we'll be back together sharing some conversations in the future, hopefully not too long in the future as well. And for now, I will be back with you same time next week with some more installments and some more wisdom. And if you have any questions for me or for Lucy, you can reach out to Lucy on the links in the show notes, or me, Salarah at salarahstarre.com, or my Instagram, Salarah K Starre. And I look forward to being back with you soon. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen. And remember to share this with anybody that you feel needs to hear this wisdom right now. It might just be the one thing that they need to help them with the next part of their journey. Take care. Bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to the Salarah Starre Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you never miss out. And you can stay connected with me on Instagram at Salarah Starre. And for even more inspiration and explore my courses and coaching at salarahstarre.com. You deserve to live a deeply connected and fulfilling life. And it's only you that can make it happen.